My name is Mara Ellison, and I was 42 years old the night my older brother stood in the center of my parents' backyard, raised a champagne glass in front of 32 relatives, and called me the daughter who had always needed saving. My mother laughed first. My father looked down at his shoes. My brother's wife pressed her fingers to her mouth, pretending she was embarrassed for me, but I saw the smile hiding behind her wedding ring. I lifted my own glass of lemonade, returned his toast in 13 words, and by the time I sat back down, no one at that table could look at him without blinking. But the story did not begin in that backyard. It began 7 months earlier, at 6:18 on a Tuesday morning, with one quiet notification from the county recorder's office and a file attachment I would not open in front of another living soul until the night my family finally learned what had been stolen from them. When they did, my father cried into both hands. My mother said my name like it hurt her mouth. And my brother, for the first time in his life, had no clever answer. Before I take you back to that summer evening, tap the like button if you have ever carried the truth alone because everyone else preferred the lie. Tell me in the comments where you are watching from. I read every single one. Now let me bring you back to the morning of my parents' 40th anniversary party, 5:43 a.m., and a tray of deviled eggs cooling on my kitchen counter. The house was quiet except for the old refrigerator humming in the corner and the small metallic click of the ceiling fan in the dining room. I had boiled the eggs the night before, peeled them at midnight, and covered the yolk mixture with plastic wrap the way my grandmother used to do when she was preparing food for people she did not entirely trust. My grandmother had believed in feeding everyone. She had not believed in forgiving everyone. There is a difference. I stood barefoot on the kitchen tile, spooning paprika over the eggs with a hand steadier than I felt. Outside, the first light of July pressed against the windows in a pale blue sheet. The air smelled like rain even though the forecast said clear skies. My dog, Hazel, slept under the table with her nose tucked beneath her paw, the way she did when she knew I was leaving early. On the chair beside the door sat a black leather tote. Inside it, under a folded cardigan and a package of paper napkins, was a sealed accordion file with a red rubber band around it. The file contained 7 months of records, 3 notarized copies, 2 sworn statements, 1 old handwritten letter, and a photograph I had not been able to look at for longer than 5 seconds without feeling something sharp move behind my ribs. I did not open the file that morning. I knew what was inside. I had known for weeks. I packed the deviled eggs in 2 shallow containers. I slid them into a cooler with ice packs and set the cooler by the tote. Then I stood in the middle of my kitchen and listened to the refrigerator hum. The anniversary party started at noon, but my mother had asked me to arrive by 8. Not because she needed me there, because she needed my labor there. There are families where showing up means being loved. In mine, showing up meant carrying folding chairs, refilling pitchers, finding the serving spoons nobody else could locate, and smiling when somebody asked why I still lived alone. I checked myself in the hallway mirror before I left. Navy dress, low sandals, hair pinned back. No jewelry except my grandmother's small silver watch, the one my mother had once said looked too serious on me. I wore it anyway. I had been wearing it every day since January. At 6:12, I locked my front door. Hazel lifted her head once from the window and watched me step onto the porch. A robin stood in the wet grass, stabbing at the ground like it had personal business there. The cooler went into the back seat. The tote went into the passenger seat. The accordion file shifted inside it with a heavy paper sound I felt more than heard. I drove to my parents' house by the river road because it was the long way, and because the long way gave me 12 extra minutes to be someone's daughter before I had to become the family's witness. My parents lived in the same white farmhouse they had bought in 1984, back when my father still believed his knees would last forever and my mother still kept recipe cards in alphabetical order. The house sat at the edge of 3 acres and leaned slightly toward the west, as if it had grown tired of standing straight for people who did not notice. By the time I pulled into the gravel drive, there were already 6 cars parked under the maple trees. By noon, there would be 32 people. Cousins, aunts, neighbors who called themselves family. 2 former co-workers of my father's, 1 woman from my mother's church who had known me since I wore braces and still introduced me as Poor Mara. My brother's black Range Rover was parked closest to the porch. Of course it was. Evan always parked as if the ground had been expecting him. He was standing beside the back steps when I got out of the car, wearing linen pants and a blue shirt with the sleeves rolled to his elbows. He looked like a man photographed in a magazine article about easy success. His wife, Celeste, stood beside him in a cream sundress, one hand resting lightly on her stomach, even though she was not pregnant and had never wanted children. She used that hand placement when she wanted people to soften around her. My mother opened the screen door and said, "There he is." Not, "There they are." Not, "You're both here." "There he is." Evan smiled as if he had personally invented sunrise. My mother came down the steps too quickly for a woman with arthritis in both hips and wrapped both arms around him. I lifted the cooler from my back seat. My father was sitting in the rocker on the porch, tying and untying the same knot in a length of garden twine. He looked thinner than he had at Easter. His shirt hung from his shoulders the way wet laundry hangs from a line. When he saw me, he gave me one small nod. "Morning, Dad," I said. "Morning, kiddo." He had called me kiddo my whole life. Some days it felt like affection. Some days it felt like a refusal to learn my name. Aunt Ruth was at the outdoor sink, rinsing lettuce she had already rinsed twice. She was my father's younger sister, 71 years old, narrow as a fence post and twice as hard to move. She looked up when I placed the cooler on the picnic table. "You brought it?" she asked. Her voice was casual enough for anyone listening to think she meant the eggs. I tapped the side of my tote with 2 fingers. Aunt Ruth's eyes flicked once toward the porch, then back to the lettuce. "Good," she said. "Don't let it out of your sight." Across the yard, Evan was already telling a story. He had a voice that found walls and climbed them. It moved over the heads of people and made them turn, whether they wanted to or not. He was telling everyone about the anniversary gift he had arranged for our parents, a weekend at an inn on Lake George. "They never do anything for themselves," he said, loud enough for the women by the flower beds to hear. "So I told Celeste we're not letting them argue. We're just booking it. They deserve beauty." My mother pressed one hand to her chest. "Oh, Evan," she said. The truth, which I had learned from my father's credit card statement 11 days earlier, was that my parents had paid for the entire weekend themselves. Evan had made the reservation. That was all. He had used my father's card to do it. I slid the deviled eggs into the spare refrigerator in the garage and said nothing. There is a point in every family where correcting the favorite child becomes a form of self-harm. I had passed that point sometime around 35 when Evan took credit for organizing my mother's surgery schedule after I had spent 14 hours on the phone with insurance, and he had sent one text that said, "Keep me posted." By 9:30, I had arranged flowers in mason jars, carried 2 tables from the shed, wiped rainwater from 20 folding chairs, and found the missing box of matches in the pantry behind 3 jars of pickled beets. Evan had accepted praise for moving the grill 6 inches. My phone buzzed against my hip while I was slicing lemons. I glanced down. A message from the county recorder alert system. New document recorded. Ellison Family Property Holdings, LLC. My hand paused on the knife. The lemon half sat open on the cutting board, bright and wet, like a little mouth that had just remembered something. I did not open the attachment. Not there. Not in my mother's kitchen with Celeste laughing in the next room, and my father coughing on the porch, and Evan moving through the house like a man who had hidden matches in every wall. I locked my phone and placed it face down beside the cutting board. 7 months earlier, at 6:18 on a Tuesday morning in January, a nearly identical notification had lit up my phone while I was making coffee. A deed transfer had been recorded. The farmhouse. My parents' farmhouse. Transferred from Daniel and June Ellison to Ellison Family Property Holdings, LLC. The managing member listed on the state filing was Evan Ellison. The authorized signer was Daniel Ellison, my father. Except my father had been in the hospital that week after a fall on the ice. I had driven him to physical therapy the morning the document was supposedly signed. His right hand had been in a brace. He could not hold a pen. That was the first page in my accordion file. It was not the last. At 10:15, Celeste found me in the laundry room folding napkins. "There you are," she said, as if she had misplaced me. I placed another napkin on the stack. Here I am. She leaned against the dryer, careful not to wrinkle her dress. Your mother is worried about you. That's new. Her smile tightened at the edges. Mara, don't be difficult today. This is important to them. I'm folding napkins, Celeste. How much easier would you like me to be? She looked down at the stack and picked up one napkin between two fingers. Evan says you've been asking questions about the house. I folded another napkin. Evan says a lot of things. He's trying to protect your parents. From what? She did not answer right away. That was how I knew she had rehearsed this conversation for one version of me and had found the wrong one. From stress, she said finally. From confusion. Your father isn't getting younger. No, I said. He isn't. And your mother trusts Evan. I know. Celeste placed the napkin back on the stack crookedly. You know, resentment ages a woman faster than anything. I looked at her then. Not because the sentence hurt, because it did not. A sentence loses power when you can hear who packed it into someone else's mouth. Then you should be careful, I said. Celeste's face went still. From the yard, my mother called my name. Mara, we need more ice. Celeste smiled again, but it was gone before it reached her eyes. See? She said softly. Needed. I carried the napkins outside. The sun had burned through the morning haze by then, and the backyard shone in that sharp summer light that makes every object seem too honest. The white tent Evan had rented stood at the edge of the lawn. The tables were covered in pale blue cloths. My mother had placed framed photographs of her and my father down the center of each table. Wedding photo, hospital photo after Evan was born, porch photo with me as a baby, Christmas photo from 1999, anniversary photo from 10 years earlier where my father still stood straight. In every photograph, Evan was either centered or being looked at. I had noticed that years ago. I pretended I had not. By noon, the yard was full. Children ran near the lilac bushes. The men gathered by the grill because men will stand beside fire and call it contribution. The older women sat under the tent and spoke in low voices about blood pressure, church politics, and who had stopped dyeing her hair. I poured iced tea. I handed plates to people who did not say thank you. I watched Evan move from group to group with a glass of sparkling water, telling variations of the same story. How hard it had been lately. How much responsibility had fallen on him. How he was doing his best to keep the family steady. Keep the family steady. That was the phrase he had chosen. The man who had mortgaged our parents' house without telling them was using the word steady like he had bought it outright. At 12:40, I went into the pantry for more paper cups and heard my parents speaking in the den. The door was half open. My mother's voice was tight. Evan says it's normal. My father coughed. I don't remember signing that. You forget things, Daniel. I don't forget signing away my house. A silence followed that sentence. Not empty. Full. Then my mother said, lower, today is not the day. My father said nothing. I stood very still with one hand on the pantry shelf. The paper cups leaned against my wrist. For 7 months, I had wondered if my father knew. Now I had my answer. He knew enough to be afraid. Not enough to name the fear. That is the cruelest kind of knowing. I took the cups, stepped back into the kitchen, and nearly collided with Evan. He was standing by the sink with his arms folded. Eavesdropping? He asked. Getting cups. Same thing with you. I looked past him to the window over the sink. Outside, my mother was arranging a bowl of strawberries she had already arranged. Evan lowered his voice. Don't start anything today. I wasn't planning to. Good. He smiled. The smile had made teachers forgive him, made employers promote him, made relatives pass him checks in envelopes and call it help instead of enabling. I had hated that smile when we were children because it always appeared right before I was punished for something he had done. Mara, he said almost kindly, you need to let go of the idea that everything belongs to you just because you stayed close. I held the paper cups against my chest. Everything? The house, Mom and Dad, the narrative. I almost laughed at that. Evan had started using words like narrative after his second business coach. He stepped closer. Families move forward when everyone accepts their role. And what's mine? He looked me up and down in my navy dress, at my sensible sandals, at the silver watch on my wrist. Support. It was one word. He said it like a sentence. I nodded. Then I walked past him with the cups. I added that conversation to the inside of the accordion file 2 hours later in my car. Not because it proved anything legal, because it proved something else. Intent has a smell. By 2 o'clock, the cake had been brought out. My mother had ordered it from the bakery downtown. White icing, lemon filling, sugar flowers. She and my father stood behind it while everyone sang. My father held the cake knife. His hand shook. My mother put her hand over his. For a moment, they looked like the people in their wedding photo. Then Evan stepped between them to help, and the camera phones lifted. The favorite child has a talent for finding the center of a photograph. At 2:35, after the plates were cleared and the children had been sent toward the shade with melting popsicles, Evan tapped a spoon against his champagne glass. The sound moved across the yard in 3 bright little strikes. People turned. My mother smiled before he said a word. My father looked at the table. I was standing near the end of the longest table with a pitcher of lemonade in one hand. Aunt Ruth sat 3 chairs away from me, her purse in her lap, both hands folded over the clasp. She did not look at Evan. She looked at me. Evan lifted his glass. I want to say something about family, he said. Of course he did. People like Evan are always ready to speak about things other people quietly do. He turned toward my parents. 40 years of marriage is no small thing. It takes sacrifice, loyalty, trust. Celeste nodded with wet eyes she had summoned from wherever she kept them. My parents taught us that family is everything, Evan continued. And lately I've understood that more than ever. Sometimes one child has to step up when another child can't. Sometimes one of us has to carry the practical burden because the other is still... He paused. He looked at me. The pause was the knife. Still finding her footing. A few people shifted in their chairs. My mother gave a small laugh. Not a nervous laugh. A familiar one. The laugh she used when Evan teased me and she wanted me to accept the wound as family humor. Evan smiled wider. So let's toast to Mom and Dad, he said, and to the daughter who always needed saving, even when she was too proud to admit it. There it was. The yard went quiet in layers. The children by the lilacs stopped arguing over a purple popsicle. Somebody's ice shifted in a glass. Celeste looked down, shoulders trembling with the effort of not smiling. My mother clapped twice. 2 light taps, palm to palm, like she was congratulating him for being clever. My father closed his eyes. I set the lemonade pitcher on the table. The glass was wet with condensation. A drop slid down the side and landed on the tablecloth, darkening the blue fabric into a small, perfect circle. I lifted my own glass. It was lemonade. Warm by then. Sour. I looked at Evan. I'll return the toast, I said. 32 faces turned. Evan's smile faltered at the left corner. Only the left. The right held on. I let the silence stretch until it belonged to me. The son who mortgaged our parents' house then called it protection. For 1 second, nothing happened. Then everything happened quietly. My mother's hands dropped into her lap. My father opened his eyes. Celeste stopped pretending to smile and simply stared. Aunt Ruth closed her purse with a soft click. Evan's champagne glass tilted slightly in his hand. Not enough to spill, but enough for the liquid inside to climb the rim like it was trying to escape him. What did you just say? He asked. I took 1 sip of lemonade. It tasted like sugar and steel. I think you heard me. My mother stood too fast. Mara. Her voice had the old warning in it. The one from childhood. The one that meant, stop telling the truth in a room where your brother wants comfort. but I was not a child anymore. And the room was not a room. It was a backyard full of witnesses. Evan laughed. He did it beautifully. A short, incredulous sound, like I had made an embarrassing joke. Wow, he said. Okay, so we're doing this. No, I said. You did this. I just brought words to it. My father said my name then, not kiddo. Mara. I looked at him. His face had changed. The gray around his mouth had deepened. He looked suddenly less like my father and more like a man standing in a house while smoke leaks under the door. I lowered my glass. Not here, Aunt Ruth said. Every head turned toward her. She had not raised her voice. She did not need to. Not in front of the children, she said. Not beside the cake. Not with half the county pretending not to listen. My mother looked relieved, as if Aunt Ruth had rescued the party. But Aunt Ruth was not rescuing the party. She was choosing the battlefield. Tomorrow, Aunt Ruth said. 10 in the morning, dining room, immediate family. Bring what you have. Evan's eyes narrowed. I'm not attending some ambush. Aunt Ruth turned to him. Then don't. Guilty people are allowed to be absent. A sound moved through the relatives. Not a gasp, something smaller. A little intake of collective permission. Evan set his glass down. Mom, he said. My mother looked at him. For the first time that day, she did not immediately answer. I picked up the lemonade pitcher and carried it back toward the kitchen because my hands needed something ordinary to do. Behind me, conversations tried to restart and failed. Someone asked about coffee. Someone else asked where the kids had gone. A chair scraped. A fork dropped. The party continued for 47 more minutes. No one sang. No one took another photo. At 4:12, I carried my empty containers to the car. Aunt Ruth followed me with a paper plate wrapped in foil. Cake, she said. I don't want cake. I know. She handed it to me anyway. We stood beside my car under the maple trees. The afternoon had thickened. Cicadas buzzed from somewhere beyond the ditch. He'll run tonight, she said. I know. Do you have copies? Yes. Off-site? Yes. Good girl. I had not been a girl in 24 years, but from Aunt Ruth, the words did not feel like dismissal. They felt like a blessing given in the only language she owned. She looked back at the house. Your mother will try to make this about your tone. She already has. Then don't give her tone. Give her paper. I smiled for the first time that day. A small one. The kind that barely survives the mouth. That's the plan. I drove home with the cake on the passenger seat and the accordion file pressed against the back of my tote. At a red light, my phone began buzzing. My mother. I let it ring. Evan. I let it ring. Celeste. I laughed at that one and let it ring. By the time I reached my driveway, the family group chat had 78 new messages. At 5:06, Evan posted first. Family, I'm sorry everyone had to witness Mara's behavior today. She has been under a lot of personal strain, and I hope we can all give her grace instead of feeding accusations that could hurt Mom and Dad. Please respect our parents' privacy while we deal with this compassionately. Compassionately. He always knew which expensive word to lay over the cheap thing. My mother replied with a heart. Celeste replied with praying hands. 3 cousins replied, thinking of you all. One aunt wrote, Mara, maybe apologize before this gets worse. I took a photograph of the thread. Then I placed my phone on the kitchen table, unwrapped the foil from the cake, and ate one bite standing up. It tasted like lemon and humiliation. I threw the rest away. The next morning, I woke before 6, made coffee, and opened the accordion file on the table. The first section was the deed transfer. The second section was the mortgage application. The third was the line of credit against the farmhouse. The fourth was the bank correspondence. The fifth was my father's medical records from the week of the signing. The sixth was the statement from the physical therapist confirming he could not write more than his initials at the time. The seventh was the contractor invoice for the renovation of Evan and Celeste's kitchen. Paid in cash, 4 days after the line of credit funded. The 8th was the letter from my grandmother. I kept that one facing down. At 7:22, my father called. I answered on the second ring. "Morning, Dad." He did not say morning back. "Is it true?" His voice was thin. I closed my eyes. "Some of it." "How much?" "Enough." He breathed into the phone for a long time. I could hear the porch door squeak in the background. He was outside. He always went outside when he wanted to speak without my mother hearing. "I don't remember signing a mortgage," he said. "I know. Your mother says I must have forgotten." "You didn't forget." Another breath. Then, quietly, "Do you have proof?" "Yes." "Bring it." "I will." A pause. Then he said, "Your mother is angry." "I know. At you." "I know that too." He did not apologize. My father had been raised in a house where apologies were considered decorative and therefore unnecessary. But he stayed on the line for 13 seconds after he had nothing else to say. For him, that was a paragraph. At 8:10, my mother called. "You embarrassed this family." No greeting, no question, just sentence. "Evan embarrassed this family when he put the house at risk." "You do not know what you are talking about." "I do. He has been helping us. He has been helping himself." "Stop it." "Mom, no, you stop it. You have always resented him because things came easier to him." I looked at the file on my table. Things had not come easier to Evan. They had come subsidized. 10 o'clock? I said. "If you come into my house with accusations." 10 o'clock, I repeated. "Dining room." She hung up. I poured a second cup of coffee and wrote a note on a yellow legal pad. When people are afraid of the evidence, they attack the delivery. I underlined delivery once. Then I packed the file. At 9:42, I arrived at my parents' farmhouse. Aunt Ruth's car was already in the driveway. So was Evan's Range Rover. So was Celeste's white Audi. My father's truck sat near the barn, the hood still warm from being moved. I parked under the maple trees where I had parked the day before. The yard looked different without tables. Smaller, older. A blue napkin had blown against the fence and stuck there, trembling in the breeze like something trying to leave and failing. I carried the tote inside. The house smelled like coffee, lemon cleaner, and the faint sourness of flowers left too long in water. My mother stood in the kitchen with both hands pressed flat on the counter. She had changed twice that morning. I could tell because the chair near the stairs held 2 discarded cardigans. She was wearing the green blouse she wore when she wanted people to think she was calm. Evan sat at the dining room table, phone in hand. Celeste stood behind him, one palm on his shoulder. My father sat at the head of the table with his glasses folded beside him. Aunt Ruth sat near the window, purse in her lap again. There was an empty chair for me. I did not sit. "Before you start," Evan said, "I want it noted that I am here because I respect Mom and Dad, not because I accept this little courtroom fantasy." Aunt Ruth said, "Noted." Evan looked at her. She looked back. I placed the accordion file on the table. The sound it made was small. The room heard it anyway. I opened the first section and removed 3 copies of the deed transfer. One for Mom, one for Dad, one for Evan since his memory around paperwork seems very active. "Mara?" my mother snapped. "No tone," I said. "Just paper." I placed the copies down. My father put on his glasses and began reading. He read slowly with the same careful attention he had used for farm equipment manuals, seed catalogs, and the instructions on every medicine bottle. My mother did not read at first. She watched him read, as if his face might tell her which emotion to choose. Evan leaned back. "This was an estate planning move." "No," I said. "It was a property transfer into an LLC where you are the sole managing member. For liability protection. For control." Celeste spoke then. "Mara, you're making this sound sinister because you don't understand asset protection." I turned a page. "Good. Then you can explain why a line of credit was opened against the house 19 days later. My mother's head turned toward Evan. What line of credit? Evan exhaled through his nose, annoyed now. Not frightened. Not yet. The house has equity sitting idle. It made sense to access it strategically. My father looked up. How much? Evan did not answer. I slid the next page across the table. 240,000 approved. 186,000 drawn as of last month. My mother sat down. Not dramatically. Not with a gasp. Her knees simply stopped believing in the rest of her. Celeste's hand tightened on Evan's shoulder. My father stared at the paper. Evan lifted both palms. Everything has been used for family-related obligations. I turned another page. 48,000 to Riverbend Custom Kitchens. Celeste's face changed. There it was. Fear, finally. 32,000 to North Star Auto Group. Evan's jaw worked once. 17,000 to a private school deposit for Celeste's niece. That was a loan, Celeste said. From my parents' house? She looked at my mother. June, you know we would never... My house? My mother said. The words did not sound like anger yet. They sounded like someone walking into a room she thought she knew and discovering all the furniture had been moved at night. Evan leaned forward. Mom, Dad, listen to me. Mara is presenting this in the worst possible light because she has wanted control for years. Aunt Ruth's purse clicked open. Everyone looked at her. She removed a peppermint, unwrapped it, placed it in her mouth, and said, Keep going. So I did. Section by section, page by page, not loudly, never loudly. Loud would have helped Evan. Loud would have given my mother somewhere to hide. I showed them the date of the transfer. I showed them the hospital admission record. I showed them the physical therapy appointment. I showed them the signature comparison. My father's real signature leaned slightly right, small and compressed, the handwriting of a man who had fixed engines and balanced checkbooks his whole life. The signature on the deed was larger, smoother, confident in a way my father's hand had not been in years. My father stared at the two signatures side by side for a long time. Then he removed his glasses. I did not sign this. The room changed, not because the truth arrived. It had been there all morning. The room changed because my father finally opened the door and let it stand beside him. My mother looked at Evan. Tell me she is wrong. Evan's face softened immediately. That was his gift. He could become wounded in less than a second. Mom, he said, you know me. No, Aunt Ruth said. Answer her. Evan turned on her. This is not your house, Ruth. No, she said. Apparently it is yours. My mother made a sound. It was not a sob. It was smaller than that. A breath breaking on the way out. Celeste took her hand off Evan's shoulder. I noticed. So did he. He stood up. I'm not sitting here while you all accuse me of forgery. Then stand, I said. He pointed at me. You have always done this. You sit in the corner, judging everyone, waiting for someone successful to make a mistake so you can feel important. There are $186,000 missing from a credit line my parents did not knowingly authorize. It is not missing. Where is it? In circulation. Aunt Ruth laughed once, a dry, sharp sound. Good Lord. My father stood slowly. He placed both palms on the table and looked at Evan. Did you sign my name? Evan's mouth opened, closed, opened again. I protected this family. My father's face folded. That is the only word for it. Folded. As if something inside him had been holding a shape for 71 years and finally lost the strength. Did you sign my name? Evan looked at my mother. My mother looked back at him with her hands clasped in her lap, knuckles white, wedding ring pressed into the skin around it. Evan, she whispered. He sat down. There are confessions that arrive as words. His arrived as posture. Celeste stepped away from his chair, only half a step. Enough. My father lowered himself back into his seat. His eyes were wet, but no tears had fallen yet. He stared at the signature page and touched the forged name with one finger. My father built the west porch, he said. No one spoke. He built it in 1959. Before this was our house. Before I even met your mother. The man who owned it hired him and paid him in cash and 2 bushels of apples. His voice shook. I bought this place because my father's hands were in it. Then he cried. Not loudly, not like a movie. He put one hand over his eyes and cried like a man embarrassed by his own grief, but too tired to stop it. My mother reached for him, then stopped. Her hand hovered in the air between them. I watched her realize that comfort was not enough to repair what her trust had helped permit. She lowered her hand. Mara, she said. I looked at her. Her face was pale. I didn't know. I know. Her eyes filled, but I chose not to know, didn't I? No one moved. That was the first honest sentence my mother had said to me in 20 years. I did not rescue her from it. Yes, I said. The word landed between us with more weight than any accusation I could have made. Evan pushed his chair back. I need air. You need to sit down, Aunt Ruth said. I'm not a child. No, she said. You're worse. A child would have stolen from the cookie jar, not from the roof over his parents' heads. Evan walked toward the kitchen. Celeste did not follow. That too went into the room. I reached into the accordion file and removed the last section. The old letter. The photograph. My mother saw the envelope and recognized it before I said anything. Her hand went to her throat. Where did you get that? Grandma left it with me. She left what with you? I placed the envelope on the table. The paper was cream-colored, soft at the edges from age. My grandmother had written my name in blue ink. Mara. Not Maribel, which was my legal name and which nobody used unless they were angry. Mara. I opened the envelope carefully. Inside were 2 pages and 1 photograph. The photograph showed my grandmother standing on the west porch in 1963 beside my grandfather and my father as a boy. The porch beams were still raw wood then. My father was maybe 9, skinny, serious, holding a hammer too large for his hand. I slid the photograph to my father. He wiped his face with the heel of his hand and stared at it. Then I unfolded the letter. I wasn't going to read this today, I said, but I think it belongs here. My mother whispered, No. I looked at her. Why? She closed her eyes. Because she knew. She had not known about the forged deed. She had not known about the credit line. She had not known the numbers. But she had known there was a truth in my grandmother's handwriting that would not flatter her. I read, My dear Mara, if this letter is in your hands at a table where people are arguing over the farmhouse, then the thing I feared has happened. I am sorry for that. I am sorrier that I will not be there to say this myself. The house is not a prize. It is not a reward for the loudest child or the most charming child or the child who makes your mother feel successful in front of other women. It is shelter. Shelter belongs to the people who protect it. Your father loves quietly and trusts foolishly. Your mother loves loudly and chooses favorites because favorites make her feel safe. Evan has always known how to turn being loved into being obeyed. You have always known how to notice what everyone else steps over. That will be lonely for you. I wish it were not. I have placed the original family property papers in your care because I trust the child who stays after dinner to wash the knives. Not because washing knives is noble. Because people who wash knives know which edges are sharp. Protect the house if it needs protecting. Protect your father if he does not know how to ask. Protect your mother if she can bear to be protected by the daughter she underestimated. But do not protect anyone from the consequences of choosing a lie. Love, Grandma Ellis. The room was silent. I placed the letter on the table. My father had both hands over the photograph now. My mother was crying. Not beautifully, not with one tear down the cheek. She cried with her mouth closed and her shoulders shaking, the way women cry when they are trying not to disturb the furniture. Evan stood in the kitchen doorway. He had heard every word. His face had lost its shape. For once, he did not look handsome. He looked ordinary. It was startling. "So what now?" Celeste asked. Her voice was thin, practical. People become practical when the moral part has become too expensive. I removed one final sheet from the file. I wrote a plan. Evan laughed under his breath. "Of course you did." I ignored him. 1. The LLC is dissolved, or Dad and Mom are removed from all associated liability by legal counsel immediately. 2. The line of credit is frozen today. 3. Evan provides a full accounting of every dollar drawn within 10 business days. 4. Any personal expenditures are converted into a repayment agreement secured by Evan and Celeste's assets, not Mom and Dad's house. 5. A forensic document examiner reviews the signature. 6. Dad and Mom revoke any authority Evan has over property, banking, insurance, medical access, or records. 7. Aunt Ruth and I are present for all meetings until they choose independent counsel. 8. Mom and Dad decide with counsel whether to pursue civil or criminal remedies. Evan went white at the last line. "Criminal?" My father lifted his head. "You signed my name." Evan's mouth moved. No sound came out. My mother looked at the plan. Tears ran down both sides of her face now, but her eyes were clear in a way I had not seen since before my grandmother died. "Mara," she said, "will we lose the house?" It was the voice she had used on the phone after my appendix burst when I was 17. Small, afraid, motherless. "I don't know," I said. I did not lie to comfort her, not anymore. "But we have a better chance if we stop pretending today." She nodded, once, then again. "I'll sign." Evan stepped forward. "Mom." She flinched at his voice. That was new. "No," she said. One syllable. Small, not dramatic. The kind of no that had taken 40 years to form. "No, Evan. I am listening to Mara now." He stared at her as if she had spoken in another language. Maybe she had. Aunt Ruth stood. "I called Warren before I came." Warren was the family attorney. He had handled my parents' wills, 2 land disputes, and one terrible Thanksgiving when my cousin tried to sue another cousin over a boat. My mother looked startled. "You called Warren?" I did. "He'll be here in 20 minutes. Evan's head turned toward the driveway. Aunt Ruth smiled without warmth. "Don't bother running. I parked behind you." For the first time that morning, I almost laughed. Celeste sat down, hard. The rest of that day moved in sections. Warren arrived at 10:51 with a leather briefcase and the expression of a man who had been expecting this family to become expensive for years. He read the deed transfer. He read the credit line documents. He read the medical record. He asked my father 3 questions and my mother 4. Then he looked at Evan. "You need your own lawyer." Evan said, "This is a family matter." Warren removed his glasses. It stopped being only a family matter when a forged signature entered the county record. My father closed his eyes again. Celeste asked if she could leave. No one told her she could not. She went outside and called someone from the driveway. Through the dining room window, I watched her pacing beside the Audi, one hand pressed to her forehead. At one point, she looked toward the house, and I realized she was not looking for Evan. She was looking at the roofline, at the west porch, at the physical thing that had funded her beautiful kitchen. Some people do not understand theft until it becomes architecture. By 1 o'clock, the line of credit had been flagged. By 2, the bank had frozen further draws pending review. By 3, my parents had signed new authorizations removing Evan from every account where he had been listed as a contact, helper, advisor, emergency backup, trusted son. Trusted son was not a legal title, but it had been the most dangerous one. At 3:30, Evan finally spoke to me directly. We were alone in the hallway outside the bathroom. The others were in the dining room with Warren. Celeste had not returned from the car. Evan's face looked 10 years older than it had at the party. "You enjoyed this," he said. "No." "Yes, you did." "No, Evan. I prepared for it. That is not the same thing." He leaned against the wall. For a second, I saw the boy who had once hidden my shoes in the freezer and convinced my mother I had misplaced them for attention. "I was going to fix it," he said. I looked at him. He believed that, not fully, but enough to survive hearing himself say it. "With what money?" He rubbed both hands over his face. "I had a deal closing." "What deal?" He did not answer. "Evan." His hands dropped. "It fell through." "When?" "April." The line of credit had been drawn again in May. I let him see that I knew. He looked away. "I just needed time." "You stole time from Dad's house." His eyes snapped back. "Don't make it poetic." "I'm not. I'm making it simple." He shook his head, almost smiling, almost hating me. "You always thought you were better than me." "No," I said. "I thought you were dangerous. I was right." That landed. He looked toward the dining room where our father sat with legal documents spread in front of him like medical scans. "Do you think he'll forgive me?" I could have said no. I could have said not for a long time. I could have said he should not. Instead, I said, "That depends on whether you are sorry or just caught." He looked back at me. For once, I could not read him. Maybe that was mercy. Maybe it was exhaustion. At 4:20, I packed the accordion file back into my tote. Warren kept copies. My parents kept copies. Aunt Ruth kept one set in her purse, which looked too small to hold that much truth, but somehow did. My mother walked me to the porch. The summer air had gone heavy. A storm was gathering to the west, dark clouds stacking beyond the cornfield. "Mara," she said. I stopped at the top step. She looked smaller in the doorway than she had the day before. Not physically. My mother was still my mother, still straight-backed, still wearing lipstick at 4 in the afternoon in her own kitchen. But something had been removed from her. Certainty, maybe, or the luxury of being wrong without cost. I clapped. She said. I knew what she meant. At the party, at Evan's toast, at a lifetime of small humiliations she had treated as jokes because laughing with the powerful child had always felt safer than defending the quiet one. "Yes," I said. Her face crumpled. I heard myself. That sentence nearly did it. Nearly brought me to her. Nearly made me put my arms around her and say the thing daughters are trained to say. It's okay. But it was not okay. And I was done using my comfort to erase other people's clarity. "I'm glad," I said. She nodded. A tear slipped down her cheek. "I don't know how to be your mother correctly now." I looked out over the yard. The blue napkin was still caught against the fence. "Start with honestly," I said. Then I walked down the steps. My father was standing beside my car. He had my grandmother's photograph in his hand. "Can I keep this?" he asked. "Yes." He nodded. Then he did something he had not done since I was 12. He hugged me first. Not the one-arm holiday hug. Not the stiff shoulder pat. A real hug. His hand rested between my shoulder blades, large and shaking, and for one second I was a child again, standing in a hallway during a thunderstorm while he told me lightning was just weather and weather always passed. "I'm sorry, kiddo," he said into my hair. 2 words, maybe 3 if kiddo counted. From him, it counted. I drove home under a sky that had turned almost green. Halfway down the river road, the rain started. It came hard, sudden, loud on the roof of the car. I pulled into a gas station parking lot and sat there with the wipers working furiously and my hands in my lap. I did not cry. Not then. I had cried in February after the second bank statement. I had cried in March when I found the hospital date. I had cried once in April on the laundry room floor because Hazel had brought me her leash and I could not get up. By July, the crying had become unnecessary. The body knows when a debt has been paid. At home, I fed Hazel, changed out of the navy dress, and placed my grandmother's watch on the kitchen table. The family group chat was silent. That silence lasted 18 hours. At 9:03 the next morning, Celeste posted, "Please keep us in your prayers. Evan is going through a deeply painful misunderstanding with his family, and we are choosing privacy and healing." Aunt Ruth replied 2 minutes later. No, that was the whole message. No punctuation, no explanation, just no. For reasons I still cannot fully explain, that was the moment I laughed. Not a polite laugh, not a bitter one, a real laugh. Hazel lifted her head from the rug and looked at me as if checking whether this new sound was safe. It was. In the weeks that followed, the story changed depending on who was telling it. Evan told some relatives it was a paperwork mistake. Celeste told others he had been trying to help my aging parents modernize their assets. My mother told her church friend she was learning some hard lessons about trust, which was as close to a public confession as she could manage in August. My father told no one anything. But every Wednesday for 6 weeks, he came to my office at 4 o'clock with a paper bag containing 2 blueberry muffins from the bakery downtown. He never called ahead. He would sit in the chair across from my desk, place 1 muffin in front of me, keep 1 for himself, and talk about ordinary things. The weather, a neighbor's fence, the strange noise his truck made in second gear. On the 4th Wednesday, he said, "Warren thinks we can keep the house." I set my pen down. "That's good." He nodded. "The bank's fraud department is involved." "I know." He looked out my office window. "Your brother called." I waited. He cried. I waited again. My father picked a crumb from the muffin wrapper. I wanted that to fix something. I knew exactly what he meant. There are people whose tears once controlled the weather in a family. When those tears finally fail, everyone has to learn what rain actually is. "Did it?" I asked. He shook his head. "No." We sat quietly after that. The office clock ticked. A delivery truck hissed at the curb outside. Somewhere down the hall, my assistant laughed at something on the phone. Then my father said, "Your grandmother was right about the knives." I smiled down at my papers. She usually was. My mother's repair looked different. It came in short phone calls. At first, she called about documents, then about recipes, then about things she had never asked me before. "What time do you usually leave work? Do you still like peach jam? Was I lonely after the divorce or relieved?" That last question came on a Sunday evening while I was watering basil on my back steps. I turned the hose off and sat down on the porch. "Both," I said. She was quiet. I should have asked then. Yes. The old Mara would have softened it. The new one let truth stand upright. My mother breathed out. "I'm trying not to ask you to make me feel better." That was the first sentence she said that sounded like work. "I appreciate that," I said. We stayed on the phone for 3 more minutes. She told me the hydrangeas were turning blue. I told her mine had died because I forgot to water them during the heat wave. She said she could bring me a cutting. I said yes. When she brought it 2 days later, she did not come inside. She stood on my porch in white pants and a straw hat, holding the plant like a peace offering she was not sure I would accept. I took it. "Thank you." She nodded. Then she looked past me into the house. "You changed the curtains." 3 years ago." Her mouth trembled, not because of the curtains, because of the years. "I'm sorry," she said. "I held the hydrangea cutting between us." "I know." "Not I forgive you. Not yet." "I know." That was where we were. A small porch, a plant in a plastic pot. A mother learning that access was not the same thing as entitlement. Evan moved out of his house with Celeste in September. Not because of me. Because Celeste's name had appeared on 2 transfers she had insisted she knew nothing about. And her own attorney had apparently explained what joint benefit meant in very plain language. They separated quietly, or tried to. Nothing in our family stayed quiet for long. By October, Evan had signed a repayment agreement. The amount was not enough. It would never be enough. But it was legal, structured, and secured. He also agreed to cooperate with the bank's investigation. Whether that cooperation came from remorse or self-preservation, I did not know. I no longer made a hobby of interpreting his soul. That was freedom. Aunt Ruth took me to lunch the day after the agreement was signed. We went to a diner near the highway where the coffee tasted burnt and the waitress called everyone honey with equal suspicion. Aunt Ruth ordered tuna melt. I ordered soup. For 10 minutes, we ate without speaking. Then she said, "Your grandmother wanted to leave the house to you." I looked up. "What?" Aunt Ruth wiped one corner of her mouth with a paper napkin. She considered it. Before she died. She said you were the only one who understood a house as a responsibility, not a trophy. I set my spoon down. Why didn't she? She knew it would make your mother hate you. The soup cooled in front of me. And instead, she left you the papers. Aunt Ruth looked out the window at the highway. Sometimes people who love us do not give us the thing. They give us the means to protect the thing when everyone else fails it. I thought about that for a long time. The house had never been mine. Maybe that was why I had been able to protect it. By Thanksgiving, the farmhouse was safe enough to breathe again. Not fully safe. There were liens to unwind, legal bills to pay, signatures to verify, conversations to survive. But the roof was still over my parents. The west porch still stood. My father had started fixing the loose board near the steps. My mother had started labeling folders in a cabinet that had once been full of expired coupons and old church bulletins. She showed me the cabinet the week before Thanksgiving. "Financial records," she said, pointing to one folder. "Insurance. Medical. House?" Then she touched the last tab. "Mara." I looked at her. "What's in that one?" "Things I need to ask you before I assume." I had to turn away for a second. Some apologies arrive as systems. Thanksgiving itself was small. No cousins, no Celeste, no Evan. Just my parents, Aunt Ruth, me, and later my neighbor Alan, who had nowhere else to go and brought sweet potatoes in a casserole dish wrapped with 2 towels. My mother did not ask me to arrive early. I did anyway. Not to prove anything. Because I wanted to. We cooked in a kitchen that felt unfamiliar without performance in it. My father peeled apples at the table. Aunt Ruth made gravy and insulted the thickness of it until it improved. My mother burned the first batch of rolls and did not blame anyone. At dinner, my father lifted his glass. My body stiffened before I could stop it. He noticed. His eyes moved to mine and something passed between us. Memory. Regret. A promise not to turn a toast into a weapon to shelter. He said simply. Aunt Ruth lifted her glass. My mother lifted hers. I lifted mine. No one said Evan's name. Not because we were pretending, because some absences are already speaking. After dinner, while my mother and Alan argued kindly about pie crust, I stepped onto the west porch. The air was cold enough to make my lungs feel clean. The fields beyond the house were dark. The porch boards creaked under my feet in the same place they always had. My father came out a minute later and stood beside me. He had put on his old barn jacket, the one with frayed cuffs. For a while, we watched the yard. Then he said, "I keep thinking about that toast." I knew which one. Evan's, mine, both. "I do too," I said. "I should have stopped him." "Yes." He nodded. The truth did not break him. That was new too. "I was ashamed," he said. "Of what?" "That I needed saving." I looked at him then. The porch light made the side of his face gold and left the rest in shadow. "You didn't need saving," I said. He looked at me. "You needed someone to tell you the smoke was real." His eyes filled. He did not cry this time. He reached for my hand and squeezed it once. Inside, my mother laughed at something Alan said. Aunt Ruth told them both they were wrong. The house held. That was all. On Christmas Eve, a card arrived from Evan. No return address. Inside was a plain white card with one line written in his handwriting. I don't know how to be your brother without winning. I read it twice. Then I set it on the kitchen table beside Hazel's leash and my grocery list. I did not call him. I did not text. Not because I wanted to punish him, because every person in my life had finally begun doing their own work, and I was no longer volunteering to do the heavy part for them. 2 days later, I placed the card in a new folder. Not the accordion file, a new one. On the tab, I wrote, "Later. Some doors do not need to be locked forever. They do need hinges strong enough to hold their own weight." The following spring, my mother planted hydrangeas along the west side of my house from cuttings of her own. She arrived with gardening gloves, a shovel, and no opinion about where they should go. That last part was the gift. We planted 6 bushes. The soil was stubborn. My mother sweated through the collar of her blouse. I got mud on my knees. We worked side by side for an hour before she spoke. "I used to think you were hard to love," she said. The shovel stopped in my hands. She looked at the ground. "I think now I was loving the easy child and calling it proof." The street was quiet. A dog barked somewhere beyond the next yard. I pressed the shovel into the dirt with my foot. "I was not hard to love," I said. My mother nodded. "No," she said. "You were hard to control." That was the closest she ever came to naming the whole thing. It was enough for that day. By the next July, 1 year after the anniversary party, the farmhouse had new legal protections, my parents had independent financial oversight, and Evan had made 4 payments. He had also missed 2. The road was not straight. People who build their lives around taking do not become generous because papers are signed. But the taking had a fence around it now. That matters. On the evening of the anniversary of the toast, I drove to the farmhouse alone. My parents were at Aunt Ruth's for dinner. They knew I was coming. I had asked. That was new too. I let myself in through the side door and walked through the kitchen into the dining room. The table was bare except for a vase of hydrangeas, blue and pale green, cut from the bushes my mother had planted at my house and brought back here in a mason jar. A circle. Not the old kind. A better one. I stood beside the table for a long time. This was where I had laid out the documents. This was where my father had cried. This was where my mother had said she had chosen not to know. This was where Evan had become ordinary. This was where my grandmother's letter had come back into the house like a woman walking through her own door. I carried 1 chair to the west porch. I carried 1 glass. I carried 1 bottle of ginger beer because I had never liked champagne, and no longer drank things just because someone else thought they belonged at a ceremony. I sat on the porch my grandfather had built for bushels of apples. The evening light moved across the yard in long gold bars. The maple leaves shifted above me. Somewhere beyond the field, a tractor turned slowly toward a barn. I poured the ginger beer. The bubbles rose fast, bright, temporary. I lifted the glass. A year earlier, my brother had toasted to the daughter who always needed saving. What I had not said then, what I know now, is that I had never needed saving from being alone. I had needed saving from being useful to people who mistook my usefulness for permission. I had needed saving from the family story where silence was maturity, favoritism was love, and betrayal only counted if the person doing it looked cruel while doing it. Evan did not look cruel. That was how he got away with it. My mother did not mean to choose harm. That was how she participated in it. My father did not want to see the smoke. That was how the fire spread. And me? I had thought telling the truth would destroy the family. I was wrong. The lie had been destroying us for years. The truth only turned on the lights. Family is not the circle that keeps you trapped because you share a last name. Family is not the loudest person at the table, or the person your mother claps for, or the person who knows how to make theft sound like responsibility. Family is the person who brings the papers when the house is burning. Family is the aunt who parks behind the getaway car. Family is the father who learns to say sorry at 71. Family is the mother who plants hydrangeas and stops calling control love. Family can be smaller than you hoped. It can also be safer than you imagined. If this story spoke to you, subscribe. There are more stories here about women who stopped confusing endurance with loyalty and started setting the table with both hands free. Tell me in the comments the hardest truth you ever carried alone. I read everyone. The porch boards cooled beneath my feet. The hydrangeas on the dining room table caught the last of the light through the window. I took one slow drink, set the glass down on the rail, and listened to the house hold itself together in the dark. For the first time in years, it did not sound like silence. It sounded like shelter. If this story made you feel something, anger, recognition, relief, or even that quiet ache of finally being understood, then it did what I hoped it would. Because Sarah's story was never just about a house, or a signature, or a brother who mistook trust for permission. It was about what happens when one person in a family finally stops carrying the truth quietly so everyone else can stay comfortable. So now I have a question for you. If you had to protect one thing from the people who were supposed to protect it with you, a home, a parent, a memory, a promise, or even your own peace, what would it be? Tell me in the comments. I read everyone. And if this story stayed with you, share it with someone who has been made to feel difficult just because they were the only one willing to see clearly. If you haven't subscribed yet, I'd love to have you here for the next one. Check the description for more stories like this. Stories about women who stopped apologizing for the truth and finally learned that a smaller table can still be a safer home.